announcements that we have, and then I'm going to kick the kids out. All they hear is kick the kids out. Car wash is today. I think last week I announced that it was the same day. That's because I hadn't read the flyer. Sorry. So the car wash to support Young Life is today, actually, at 12, $10 donation. And then, Brianne, what other announcements do we have? Okay. Speaking of rest, some of the Alwag clan is out for a couple weeks. Can we just celebrate that, man? Can we celebrate that they are resting and celebrating their 20th anniversary and being together? And I'm so glad about that. When we talk about our community growing, when we talk about our vision and what God is doing, most of the time I still don't even know, and that's embarrassing, right? I want to be the leader that stands up and say, this is where we're going, who's with me? It's like, hey, but what I know for sure is that we are being called to be a people group that abides in Jesus. And then we get to watch the fruit that comes from that. We are a people group that individually we must be abiding in connected relationship with Jesus for myself. We are also a people group that prioritizes our spouses. And if you're single, your singleness and honoring that season that God has you in, because you are important, right? You as a person are valuable, important in your singleness. That's okay, right? So we prioritize God. We prioritize our closest relationships, right? We care about ourselves because we can't love neighbor if we can't care about ourselves. We prioritize our spouses. We prioritize our families. And I use this kind of because a recent illustration that was given to me was one of a tiered fountain, and that first cup that has to be filling to overflow in order to fill up the next tier is that me and my relationship with Jesus, man. And to be honest with you, I'm just constantly trying to keep that one full. And then the next tier is me and my wife, and I'm trying to make sure that vessel is filled, right? That it overflows into my wife and kids. And then out of the fullness, out of the overflow, out of the abundance of prioritizing those closest relationships, then we're able to offer ourselves to other friends, to community, to workplace, to neighborhood, to whoever God would position us to offer ourselves to, right? And so all that to say, I celebrate that Max and Marissa are out of town and pouring into each other and celebrating them, right? I want to encourage us all to be doing that same thing, to slow down this summer and make sure that we are honoring those relationships. I think you guys can be dismissed, and we'll pray and get into the rest of our conversation and content today. You guys can keep playing for just a second. You can just keep looking good, Brooke. It's cool. Lord, thank you so much. Pray your blessing over the kids as they go to enjoy their fellowship and their conversation. Bless my wife, and may your spirit just function, operate, and bless. God, as we were singing and as we're praying your blessing over this time, I'm thinking, God, would you help us to just treat every moment as sacred? The kids going and playing in the gym and having some conversation, may that be holy and sanctified and sacred and pleasing to you. May the conversations we have in our cars, may the things that we do on this day and throughout 24/7, may those be sacred and honorable moments. And so as we rest in you, recalibrate, reposition, realign ourselves with your heart, reconnect ourselves with your spirit this morning, I pray that the residual effects, the ripple effect of the blessing of this moment and our conversation would just bleed and overflow, as we were just talking about, into all the other contexts of this life that we live with you. And God, just for me personally, I think of that song that I think of songs that we sing. I surrender. I give myself away so you can use me, Lord. And I want to do that in every moment. I do that right now in this moment. Pray that you would just help me to be free to be me squeeze the sponge that is my heart, and may that offering be a blessing to my friends that are here and those that are listening at home. And may it be pleasing to you and honorable and in line with the truth of your word that we love to explore. Thank you for this moment, God. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, man. Lots going on in my heart, and which and my worry in those moments is that I might overtalk, right? So I just want to offer myself to you guys to be me and share, the thoughts that are on my heart and that are prepared, and anything else that God has. And so here we go with that. But some more reflections on my trip to DC. It always trips me out when I leave the confines of the big city and I have to kind of recalibrate and get acclimated, and I have some culture shock. Like when I go visit my sister, she lives outside of St. Louis, also another big city, but the suburbs of St. Louis are very slow. And I found that in DC, the suburbs of the DC area, very slow, right? Kind of this East Coast South hybrid, right? And found myself really irritated by the fact that every place was closed. Like, we got there late and we needed toothbrushes because they lost our bags. I'm like, there's not a grocery store or a Target or anything open. I'm hitting up the gas stations. Finally found a 7-Eleven. Spent like $30 on toothbrushes and a little tube of toothpaste. Like, what the heck, man? And it's in those moments that I have to slow myself down and realize, hold on, is there something wrong with me, or is there something wrong with this community and this people group right here, that they are not accommodating my way of life, right? And so then going home, it's 3 hours difference out there. So 12 o'clock at night is only 9 o'clock to us. And we usually don't go to bed in our household until 10, 11 o'clock, 12, 1 sometimes. But no, we're usually before midnight, we're down. But even so, that's 3 o'clock in the morning out there. So dealing with some jet lag and just kind of waiting for trying to settle myself down, trying to slow myself down. And I remembered a story that I heard recently that I had heard once before. I keep mentioning Cliff and I went to this retreat a few weeks ago. And one of my takeaways from this retreat was this story that I've now heard a couple times about, and it's been told in different ways. I'm not really sure what the original story is, so maybe you've heard this before, but it's a story of a missionary that went to Africa. And he arrives at this port city in Africa, and he wants to go to some of the inhabited rural areas and set up shop and minister. And so he hires some locals from that port town to help him kind of make his trip to where he's going. And so the first day, they're making great time. And he's really trying to get to his destination. He's excited. He's like, man, let's get there. Let's go. Man, these guys are awesome. So glad I got this crew with me. And they're making great time. And then the next day, he wakes up ready to go with the same tenacity, the same rigidity, the same speed, the same pace. And the people that he hired to work with him just sat down. And they're not moving. And he's upset. He's frustrated, like, hey, what's going on? We're ahead of time. We're making great time. We're making a great pace. We're going to get there. We're on track. And their response to this guy was, you Americans move way too fast. We must sit here and rest and wait for our souls to catch up to our bodies. We must sit and rest and wait for our souls to catch up to our bodies. It's as if like it's a form of jet lag. So as I sat with my jet lag, I started engaging this book that I mentioned to you guys last week, right? And this book is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. We're going to talk a little bit about that book, and I'm going to give you some highlights of it. But one of the things that surprised me, well, it didn't really surprise me. I was like, oh my gosh, there it is again, is he tells that exact same story that I just shared. That we got to sit and rest and wait for our souls to catch up with us. Let me just share some thoughts from you guys, see if it resonates. I'm going to commission anybody who feels led, commission you guys to pray about this, if this would be a book for you guys to engage in your summer reading. I'm not going to, but I think there can be some unity in our community reading this book. It's a pretty easy read. I hear people say that men don't like to read, men don't read books. I like to change that narrative because I am that man that doesn't like to read and doesn't read books, or was, and now I whatever. You can get audio if you want. But I'm going to read just a few excerpts from this book and see if it resonates with you. This one's interesting. It's a stat. It says, before Edison, the average person slept 11 hours a night. 11. Anybody get 11 hours of sleep last night? No? Got a girl. Hey, good for you. Apparently sleep's important to health, right? That was pre-Edison, right before technology shows up and gives us lights, right? We used to rise and fall with the sun. Talking more about technology, says, yet in spite of our smartphones and programmable coffee pots and dishwashers and laundry machines and toasters, most of us feel like we have less time, not more. I love this one. It says, in the 1960s, futurists all over the world, from sci-fi writers to political theorists, thought that by now we'd all be working way fewer hours. One famous Senate committee in 1967 was told by 1985 the average American would work only 22 hours a week for 27 weeks a year. Everybody thought the main problem in the future would be too much leisure. Right? A recent study found that the average iPhone user touches his or her phone how many times a day, do you think? How many times does the average iPhone user touch their phone each day? What? 74. 35. All day, yes, but how many times during that day? 1,000. 2,617 times a day. Oh. Hey, so I'm going to give you a couple more from this book, right? I promise you, you might not agree with everything. I promise you it's going to challenge. I think this book is really good for the culture, the counterculture that God is kind of developing within our community. He says, I think it's wise to cultivate a healthy suspicion of technology. Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm touching my phone right now. It's in my pocket. Ugh. It doesn't mean it's like, ugh, get away, right? Obviously, this transition's spiritual, and I'm finished with this thought right here. Because what you give your attention to is the person you become. What you give your attention to is the person you become. What I give my attention to is the person that I become. No wonder I need to abide in Jesus, because I abide in a whole. I make my home, right? That abide. I become family with some really unhealthy things in it. messes with who I become. So he obviously exposes the unhealthiness and the hurried pace that how we live life in America, and I love how he calls it out. And he offers some disciplines, some spiritual disciplines for how we can be counter. What's the word I'm looking for? We can counter that pace with some of our disciplines, and one of those disciplines is Sabbath. And so I want to talk a little bit more about Sabbath today. I want to look at a scripture and invite us to the idea that what we do on Sundays, this day that God has given us, is not just a moment to go to church. It's not a church day. It's a day to rest. It's a day to stop. It's a day to cease. Great story that he picks out in this book that you'll read is a moment of when Jesus is challenged for not going with the cultural behaviors and the cultural norms and really laws of the community on the Sabbath. And Jesus is awesome because he kind of has a twofold. Jesus is always gangster in how he responds to conflict and people calling him out. And so he addresses just how unhealthy the culture is, and then he also just gives a little pinhole, a little prophetic talk into who he is and the authority that he has. So go with me to Mark chapter 10. Not 10. Don't go to chapter 10. You can, but then you'll have to go back to your left. Chapter 2. Mark chapter 2 is where we're going. Mark chapter 2. We're going to look at verse 23 through the end, so that last section of Mark chapter 2. Ready to rock? No judgment on those of you who are using your phones. Verse 23. And it happened that he was passing through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples began to make their way along while picking the heads of grain. The Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and he and his companions became hungry? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest and ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for anyone to eat except the priests. And he also gave it to those who were with him." Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Pharisees, these kind of self-elected moral police of the community, taking upon themselves to do their work on the Sabbath of judging community, right? And calling out the disciples. And what Jesus does here is crazy because he draws upon a story of King David when he hadn't yet been positioned and put in place as king, but he had already been anointed as king. David hadn't been fully made known to the whole community, but he knew who he was and the authority that he had. So this is in the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He knew who he was, and he knew the authority that he had, just like David. And he lets these guys know, look, man, you're looking at this wrong. Your laws that you have in place about the Sabbath, keep in mind the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. The law was that you are not to harvest. You're not to go out into your fields and harvest and put in that work because you don't want to miss a day of harvest, right? Oh, I don't want to miss an opportunity. Reminds me of Chick-fil-A, right? Like, think of, you ever doing your math, like, man, imagine how many people, Sunday would probably be Chick-fil-A's biggest day. That would probably be their biggest and best harvest day. How do I know that? Because it's most Sundays that I crave Chick-fil-A and I just want an easy meal that's somewhat healthy in my mind, right? It's like, but that was God. He said, I rested. I need you to rest. Don't go out and harvest out of your anxiety. There's one day that you don't function out of your anxiety and your worry and your concern and the pressures of life. Let it not be today. Remember the rest that you have in me. Remember the eternal rest that you're promised in me. Recalibrate, settle down from your jet lag, let your soul catch up to your body, and remember the promise that we have. And so Jesus is also kind of given a little, you don't know this yet, but I'm king and I got the authority to call out your man-made laws. And what he's also doing is Jesus is introducing the community to a new language and a new perspective on the law, and to look at the law through God's lens from a little different angle. And he's introducing the whole kingdom vibe. Something else that he's doing, besides letting people know that he's king and true rest is found in being a follower and an abider in him, he's also exposing just how messed up this culture is, just how messed up the religious culture at the time that the society was. And he's like, look, you guys are making all these laws, hundreds of additional laws on top of God's law that were developed within that society at the time. And he's saying, look, man was not made to serve these laws and to fall in line with the laws that you guys have put in place. The Sabbath, the law that God made, that was made as a gift. The Sabbath was given. The commandment, what is it? The fourth commandment in the 10 Commandments was given as a gift for us to stop, drop everything, and let our souls find rest and be fulfilled, be refilled and refreshed and restored. And at the time of Jesus' society, and this is what John Mark Comer, the author of this book, really, I love that he exposes this. Jesus had to call them out on that they took the Sabbath too seriously. They took it too religiously. We now live in a society that doesn't take the Sabbath too seriously. So God's message to us is a little different. Because if I was to, hey, God, do we have a Sabbath? Do you honor the Sabbath? Many people would say, well, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I don't have to Sabbath. I don't have to rest. I don't have to stop. Jesus' message to us might look a little different. I think is a little different. Because we're a society that does not honor the Sabbath rigidly. We do the exact opposite. And so I think God's call, God's word for us is to remember that this day, or really any day, because for some of us, like today is a work day. And for some of the volunteers or some of the other staff, it's work day. Don't feel like Sabbath anymore, does it, Brianne? Nah. Nah. I love this place. I want to work here. I love this place. Let's do it. I'm speaking about me. Yeah. Anyway. Man, ministry is something sometimes, isn't it? So, anyways. But Sabbath is the day that God has given us to rest. And truth be told, for the volunteers of churches, the staff of churches, Sabbath is no longer on Sundays for us. but we have to be disciplined. All of us have to be disciplined. And for some of you, it is awesome. Whew. Drink that in. Rest. Stop. You guys remember stop, drop, and roll? Okay? You got to stop, drop, and roll on the ground to keep the fire from spreading around. If your clothes start burning, you better start learning to stop, drop, and roll. No one? No? Thank you. Appreciate that. This day, the Sabbath day, is given to us to stop, drop everything, and fill our souls. To rest in Him and allow our souls to be restored, rejuvenated, re-energized. It's not the day to fulfill our religious duty. We look at the culture that Jesus was addressing, and oh man, what a shame that they perverted this Sabbath day, this day that God blessed and made holy. The day that he told us to remember, right? To remind us of the gift that He's given us, an eternal rest in Him. This is our day to rest. We look at them and say, oh, what a shame that they could put these rigid laws on people, that they couldn't even eat and take grain on. What's up with that? But man, truth is, church folks, man, we've perverted the Sabbath too. Shame on you guys for wearing flip-flops. Shame on you. Shame on you for wearing shorts. Where's your tie? Anybody wearing a hat? Oh my gosh, don't you wear a hat. Right? We take the Sabbath and this Sunday rest thing. I got sneakers on. Sneakers. Right? Man. Church folks love to pervert some stuff, don't we? Man, we love to take Sabbath and say, okay, we're going to go to church, and then we're going to make sure we go to the grocery store, and we're going to make sure we clean the house, we're going to make sure we do the laundry. Hey, if that's restful for you, like there's freedom on the Sabbath, right? The word Sabbath, Shabbat, means to cease, stop, desist. God has given us a cease and desist order. One day a week as a gift and a blessing. It's like Christmas. How many weeks is there? 50 what? 2? It's like a holiday once a week. It's like, the best way I've heard it described is a snow day. And if you don't know what a snow day is when you live in a place where it snows and you wake up to a fresh snow that it's not safe for people to get on the roads and go to school and go to work. And you go, oh, yes, I could do pretty much whatever I want to do today. Fire day. Yeah, it's fire day here. It hits a little different when it's fire. Natural disaster, yeah. But similar, right? Like, God, what do I want to do today? Did you wake up this morning and say, oh man, what do I want to do today? You probably said, what do I want to do after I go to church? Or what do I need to do after I go to church? What do we got to get done today? Right? But I don't know if it was, I get to go spend some time with the Father, with my church community. And that's my prayer. Like, that's my prayer, that we would be a community that's like, oh, man, it's good to be together. Because we already have that posture with the Lord. It's like, oh, Lord, so good to rest in you. So good to rest in you. And so I'm inviting you to take inventory of how you honor the Lord with Sabbath, with your Sabbath, with the gift that's been given to you. Do you stop and drop everything and let your soul be filled? No, me neither. Me neither, Fernando. A lot of times, and let me tell you, like, rest is not, and this is awesome too, because a couple years ago, oh man, let me tell you this. A few years ago, some of you guys remember this, I did something called the Bonhoeffer Project. The Bonhoeffer Project is a program for a whole year. I've done it a couple times, where we get with other ministry leaders and pastors, church leaders, and we prayerfully discern and come up programmatically with how we are going to turn our church communities or our ministry that we lead into a disciple-making factory, basically. And so I went into that wanting to learn, how can I learn how to make disciples and lead others to be disciples who make disciples who make disciples? Great thing, in line with God's mission. It's still our mission. But God's word for me through that whole year, you don't Sabbath. We did an activity where we were supposed to inventory and record how we spend our days, our schedule, our weekly schedule. And I was like, look at me, I'm spending time with people making disciples here, spending time here. I'm making disciples all over the place. Look at me, I'm a disciple maker. And God was like, yeah, when are you resting? When are you having Sabbath? When are you connecting and resting in me and trusting me to do the work? And the answer to that was never. I was never having Sabbath. And so since then, for the last 4 years, Fridays have become typically my Sabbath day. I don't honor it perfectly all the time, but I'm still learning. Like, as the things that, because a lot of times for me, it comes to Sabbath, and it's just like, it's not rest, it's exhaustion, it's crash and burn. And then I spend the whole day in anxiety thinking, oh, I'm not full enough yet, and I got to go back into the whole next 6 days. So I'm inviting us to begin to unpack the gift that is Sabbath. Challenging us to learn to be countercultural. I promise you, if you feel led to read this book with us, and you choose to begin to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your lives and go against the grain of society, I promise you, reading this book is going to change you a little bit. It's going to give you some perspective. You're going to touch that phone less. And not only that, but you're going to honor Sabbath, and then your other days will begin to look different. The way you move and go about the rest of your days will look different. I was watching a movie the other night called Starfire. Was it Starfire, Brooke? I think Starfire. It's not called Star something Fire. What is it? Fireheart. Yeah, that's what I said. Fireheart. That's what I said. Fireheart. Thank you. Watching this movie, Fireheart, and it's about firemen. And the lesson in there was people were being trained as firemen, and they would want to run into a fire and rescue and save people and do as much as they could, right? But that's when accidents happen, when you rush into a situation. And so their motto was, don't run, walk with purpose, assessing the situation, making wise decisions, aware of threats, aware of danger. I promise that when you read this book, you will slow down. You will not run at the same pace, and you will walk with greater purpose, not just one day a week, but every day of the week. Promise. So my invitation to us is to be countercultural like Jesus, and I want you to pray about reading this book. I meant to print out a sign-up sheet if you want one, so maybe I'll just put one on a piece of paper here before we finish up, and you come write your name down on a piece of paper. But I invite you to pray about it if you want this book, and I will order it for you, and you can get it next Sunday. And then I invite you to read it with someone. Okay? So I want you to let me know who you're going to read it with. I'm good if you're reading it with your spouse. I encourage you to read it with somebody else, a friend, maybe somebody that you share a discipleship relationship with, but I encourage you to read it in community and read it with somebody else. Okay? The last thing I want to do is close with something else. Jesus' disciples, it was customary for a rabbi, a teacher, to speak on behalf of his disciples, to defend them. And so when we abide in Jesus, that makes him our rabbi. We follow him, and he defends us. He goes to bat for us. His disciples were not doing something unlawful. They were actually doing something very lawful. You don't have to flip there. Did I give you Deuteronomy? I did. I gave you Deuteronomy 23. Check this out, man. So good. And I discovered this verse. I was so excited when I realized, oh my gosh, this is what they're doing. In Deuteronomy, there's just tons and tons of laws. And I don't know about you, but in the past when I've read these laws from the Old Testament, I was like, man, this is it's exhausting and boring. And it's like, you read a Bible in a year, and I know people who read through the Bible every year, and it's like, man, what is wrong with you? How do you just grind through these? And then, there's just these gems in there. And so in Deuteronomy 23, there's a whole bunch of laws written. And then there's these two laws at the end of chapter 23, verses 24 and 25 says, when you enter your neighbor's vineyard, then you may eat grapes until you are fully satisfied. But you shall not put any in your basket. Then it says in verse 25, when you enter your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not wield a sickle in your neighbor's standing grain. Man, that's awesome. These guys were walking through their neighbor's field and just grabbing a snack, man. But had they harvested, you better believe. Hey, guys, no. That's not what we're doing. The good teacher would have rebuked them as he is rebuking us today, right? For harvesting on the Sabbath, for doing too much work on the Sabbath, for not resting in him and trusting him and being faithful, right? He would rebuke them, but he didn't because they were being obedient. Had they harvested somebody else's grain, somebody else's fruit, somebody else's grapes, Jesus would have called them out, and then the Pharisees would have seen it, and Jesus would have said, yeah, you're right, man, they should not be doing this. Guys, knock it off. That ain't yours. But what they were doing was not wrong. It was in line with the scriptures. Just grabbing a snack. But they were not allowed to reap what somebody else has sown. And I love that because I think I've shared this before, but I love that lesson because it's not fair to others. It's not fair. It's not fair to the people who work in church and pour out for others, but then we don't turn around and have our own abiding relationship with Jesus. The reason that it would be wrong and unlawful to reap somebody else, I mean, you think about it. Somebody comes into your vineyard and starts reaping what you've worked hard on. Hey, man, that ain't yours. That ain't yours to keep. Don't mind. It's more than I can eat, so you go ahead, have your snack. But you start reaping what I've sown and what I've worked on, that's not fair. My relationship with Jesus is not your relationship with Jesus. You got to have your own. Brianne's, you got to have your own. Hers is not yours. You got to have your own. So when we're in each other's presence and the overflow splashes on you, you can have that. That's my gift to you, man. That's my gift. You're passing through. You're in my presence. Go ahead. Have a little bit. But you got to go abide for yourself. I love those scriptures because it's accountability for each of us as followers of Jesus to have our own abiding relationship so much so that it overflows in harvest so that it drips out on everybody else's. And so where does it start? With that first tier. Me and my Jesus. Me and my Father abiding in him till it overflows. That's where it starts, man. And that's the fruit that came from our forefathers, our patriarchs, our disciples that walked with Jesus in that way. And now it's just dripped and overflowed and had a ripple effect of a blessing all the way to 2022. I'm going to stop, but because that's what we do on Sabbath, we stop. But I'm inviting you guys to begin to take inventory of how you spend your Sabbath. Stop, drop everything. God's given us a cease and desist order and given us a gift of an opportunity to rest and allow our souls to be refilled, refreshed, restored in healthy ways. You guys can come up and do that. Make sure, if this interests you and going through this book as a community, it's a great summer read, I think. It's a very easy read. Let me know, and I'll be happy to order one for you and for whoever you are feeling led to read it with. All right?